Welcome to the Hopenning, the place where hope is happening, with your hosts Fran Cadron and Marina Theron-Monnery. For more information about Fran and Marina, or to apply to be a guest on the show, please go to our website www.hopenning.com. The Hopenning is for informal purposes only and is based on the research of your hosts, Fran and Marina. They, as well as their guests, are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from this podcast, which is not intended to replace any professional medical advice or care by medical professionals you are currently utilizing.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hopenning, the place where hope is happening. I am Fran, and I am here with my beautiful co-host, Marina. And today, on episode number 113, we're talking about emotional eating. And myself, I'm going to speak for myself right now, Marina. Emotional eating plagued me for, I would say, 50 years. And so I have an intimate relationship with food. I'm much better now. But it's something that many women struggle with, regardless of their age and education and color and gender. Many people suffer with emotional eating. So Marina, you had wanted to talk about emotional eating today. So what is it that why did this topic really spur your interest today?
Fran, it's interesting because just like you, it's something that plagued me all my life. And it is only in the last, I would say, 3 years that maybe 3.5 years that I realized the why. Why did I have that out of balance, out of sync relationship with food? And an opportunity came to me about 3 years ago to work for a clinic that specializes in helping women specifically with emotional eating. And it's been an eye opener for me to see women from any walk of life in any country battling with this thing that is emotional eating. And I always think when you are a newborn baby, you have to eat, but what food is for you then is just fuel, where you know exactly you are in tune with your body. You know exactly that if I'm hungry, I need food now. And if you're full, your mom can try to give you more food. It's not going to happen. You will not take more food. You know when to stop. But over time, things change. And for people who are in that downward spiral, trapped in the cycles of emotional eating, there's always a reason why their minds decided that food is becoming a coping mechanism for them. And that is so interesting in the work that we do today. So I'm going to ask you, Fran, what changed for you? How did you change? How did you decide this is not the right way for you to live?
It was a twofold thing, actually. About 7 years ago, about 7 years ago, knowing my eating habits, you get quite familiar with eating habits. And for me, I could be really good. I could stick to this, the salads and the stuff that, is healthy eating. And then I would binge eat. And it would be nothing could satisfy me, nothing. So one cookie was too much. And 10 were not enough. So that's your typical food addict, is where once you get started on something, you just can't stop. It's like your brain gets hijacked. And 7 years ago, I decided, okay, I know what I'm doing. I can't stop it on my own. So I began a program, very much like a 12-step program, where my food is written down and I know what I'm going to eat before the day even starts. And I stick to that and only that. I weigh my food, I measure my food, and I stick to that food. And gradually my brain started to change. I was no longer that person who needed to eat that food. And then when I began to do hypnosis and self hypnosis, and other people hypnotized me, um, we got to the bottom of it, right? So I had already established very good eating patterns, but it was a regimen, it was a routine, it was something that I did every day in order to control my eating. And then once I started being, once I got my own hypnotherapy on myself, then I got to the root of it. I got to the root of why I was an emotional eater. And that made the change for me. So, Marina, what made the change for you?
So
Or
Fran, I
I,
always
I
keep
think
this
it's,
photo here because it's such a great reminder, and I use it with my
oh,
clients all the time. This was what who I was, and and it was after that that I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and doing a lot of research and understanding that I'm not really taking care of myself. And the older we get, if we don't take good care of our health, a lot of things goes wrong. We can end up with type 2 diabetes. We can end up with heart disease. We can end up with strokes. We can end up with dementia. We can end up with, it's a list as long as my arm, joint pain, arthritis. All of that can be prevented if you really take care of yourself. And taking care of yourself, I think, is not just physically, it is mentally and psychologically as well, emotionally. So for me, it was the biggest change came in 2018 when I was 2017 when I was diagnosed with cancer, and I wanted to know, okay, what am I doing wrong? What can I do for myself? 2018, I started to really dig deep into just improving my health, my life. It was after some light treatments for cancer and devastating surgeries. But it was then that I thought, okay, I'm going to throw anything at it. And I did. And I lost weight successfully, but it did not stick because I never dealt with the why. And it was when I figured out why did I not have control over my eating? Why did I lose the ability to say no to food? Why did I lose the ability to only eat when I'm hungry? Why did I, just like you, um, when I when I try to go on diets, at some point I'm like, okay, now I can eat again, and then I would eat as if I have to make up for all the times lost, all the meals lost, and I would gain that weight back. So, oh, so much changed for me. Understanding gives you power, as you know, and
mhm.
understanding in my life that ate, I started to eat in secret. My mom was afraid that I would gain weight, and she would come home when I was a teenager with a chocolate bar for each one of our family members, except for me. And she would say, I'm scared that you are gaining weight. And as soon as I could, I would go to the store and buy my own. And I would not just buy one, and I would eat it in secret. And that's where the trouble started. It gave me power. Also, there are so many patterns I see in the clients I have. Lack of control. If they start to eat in secret, it gives them control. It is quite an amazing thing. But what I also want to talk about is that we have to become quite conscious and accountable for the food we eat. And it's tough because life became so busy in our lifetime that it's very easy to just go to the store and eat a ready-made meal. But when we do that, we have no control over what ingredients are in there.
It's very interesting what you just said because that is so true. So if we were to go to the store, and I do this now, when I go to the store and I always look at the ingredients, always. And Yesterday I had traveled and I hadn't eaten before I traveled. So I got gas and I went to the convenience store to see if there was something I could possibly have that would fit my regimen, which is I do not eat anything that has sugar in the first three ingredients. If the first three ingredients on the list are sugar, I put it on the side. And I could not find anything in that store, even beef jerky. Beef
Yeah.
jerky had sugar as a second ingredient. Every cereal in the store had sugar as a second ingredient. Let's not even talk about chocolate bars or anything like that. And then there's the chips and that, but if you buy chips, the ingredient list is as long as your arm. And so if we were to only eat food that was that there's no ingredients other than the food, I think a lot of our eating compulsively would would go away. It wouldn't take away all the compulsive eating because it truly is an emotional thing. And, but I think that sugar and dextrose and all the other names for sugar, cane sugar, corn syrup, all of those names for sugar has really hijacked our brain and has done something to the insulin, has done something to insulin, has done something to the leptin receptors. It has really hijacked our brain. So unfortunately, in the society that we live in, where life is so busy and it's so much easier just to go through a drive-through, it's so unconsciously being fed to us that it's okay to have that and that and that and that. But the problem is eventually we become addicted to those types of super processed foods. And if we could all go back to normal, natural foods that are simple ingredients, I think it would take a lot of the problems away. But because people are emotional beings, there are things that happen to us in our childhood or young adulthood or whenever teenagehood that creates an environment in us where we become emotional eaters. And I know what happened with me, because of what we do, because of RTT. I understand now why I became an emotional eater. I know why I had to stuff my feelings down. Because with food, you really do stuff your feelings down. When you're sitting in front of the TV, and TV is one of the worst. Sorry, sitting in front of a TV watching a movie for 2 hours long is, especially in the evening, is the prime opportunity for us to sit and eat and very unconsciously eat, not mindful one bit. And suddenly all the whatever it is we were eating is gone. So, what is that all about, Marina? In your experience, why do people have this hand to mouth? I call it the hand to mouth disease.
Yeah. Well, Fran, you touched on quite a few things here. I should have made notes, but one is the foods we eat. One is sugar. One is eating unconsciously. Let's talk about the foods we eat. And we started to talk about that. I lent a book to somebody, and I wish I had it with me right now, but that really changed my perspective. It's by Dr. Robert Lustig, and it's called Metabolical. And right in the forward of this book or introduction of this book, he wrote that um, I have to paraphrase here, but it's basically if you're aware of the food you eat when it comes in a box, it is really not food, it's a product. And that product has been designed to take away your ability to tell when your body is full and when you are really hungry. It creates an addiction. And he says it's not because these companies want you sick and dead, it's because they want your money.
Mm.
If they can create an addiction chemically, then you want more of it. If you open a pack of chips or crisps, as some UK friends calls it, can you only eat one?
Well, isn't that what Pringles says? Isn't that their motto? You can't just eat one.
Exactly. You cannot just eat one. And before you know it, you eat the whole bag. And that is, in a very big way, empty calories. So educating yourself about the food you eat is so important. I cannot emphasize that enough. Whole food, read labels. If you cannot pronounce it, don't eat it. If you cannot pronounce it, it was fabricated in a lab. And a lot of our dairy products has a preservative in there that is fertilizer for
Yeah.
plants. Do you really want to eat that? And it's hard today to go without it. And it's hard to, for example, if you go to a store and you buy organic milk, it's double the price. Anyway, it's we can go on and on and on about this. The meat we eat, um, you know, the eggs we eat. Everything has become about volume and how fast it can be produced. The shelf life, if you buy a piece of a loaf of bread and it can stay fresh for 2 weeks, that's not food, that's a product. So changes I've made in my life is awareness. So I read labels. Um, I educate myself. I find out exactly what, if I see a word in a label that I don't understand, I go look it up on internet. What does that mean? And sometimes it shocks me to see what the things are we consume. We are very bad in North America. Europe is better with the things that are allowed in our foods. So I make everything. I make my own peanut butter because I know exactly what is in there. We pretty much have 3 ingredients. I bake my own bread. It has 4 ingredients. It doesn't stay fresh for a week. You can get maximum 3 days out of it. The third day you have to toast it, but it has 4 ingredients. One of them is not sugar. And at some point I even bought a ketogenic bread from Costco, but when I started to read the ingredients, I'm like, no, and it stays fresh for 2 weeks. Isn't that lovely? So awareness, I think, gives you power. And if you then decide, okay, I'm not eating chemicals anymore, I'm eating food. That is a very big step in the right direction. The second thing you touch on is sugar. Sugar is an addict. Sugar is like alcohol. And also the awareness that be careful of carbohydrates because refined carbohydrates is exactly the same as sugar. It's not what it tastes like. It's not what it looks like. It's what happens when you eat it in your body. It's how much glucose it will have to release. And glucose, insulin, too much insulin is fat. So having an awareness of that is so, so important. But we can talk about that as long as we can. But the most important thing is still why. Why? Why am I addicted to sugar? Is sugar just a replacement for something else? Why can people not say no? There are so many sugar-free challenges going on. And can you be strong and say no more sugar and try it? The thing that happened with me when I went no sugar was my palate changed. Suddenly, I could taste food. I never realized how eating sugar constantly changed my taste buds. Suddenly, I could taste food and something simple that I used to eat, I couldn't eat anymore because I could taste the chemicals. And then other foods that I normally would say no to because I couldn't appreciate it. Now I taste the layers of fantastic tastes in it, different spices, different things. It's amazing. And I can now taste sugar a mile away, even in, like you say, beef jerky. So even that, I make my own. Easy. There are so many things that are easy. I make my own crackers. I make my own mayonnaise. The list can go on.
So, Marina, so you and I understand that food is addictive because of the chemicals, because of the sugar, because of the processing in it. And I know that there are some extremely intelligent, super like intelligent people out there that are reading their labels. They are doing everything right, and yet they still binge eat in the evening when it's, might be dark, it might be put the TV on, have a little bit of sit down before we go to bed, and yet the binge eating begins. So if I know all this stuff about the food processing and the chemicals and how addictive the properties of sugar are, why do people still binge eat?
You mentioned something earlier, and that's the unconsciousness. It's once you start, I call it waking up the sleeping dragon, because a lot of times our minds would tell us, oh, you can just eat one chip, or you can just eat one cookie, or you can just eat one, whatever, one little handful of nuts. But before we know it, we cannot stop. We want more and we want more and we want more and we want more. It's waking up the sleeping dragon. I can go very, very biological on this because in my own body, I had to learn. I have an insulin response and I was insulin resistant before I became healthier. And so I know the signs of that. The moment I start, I cannot stop because it's like the sleeping dragon that I just woke up that says, feed me, feed me. It just wants more, it just wants more. So being conscious about that. The moment you allow yourself to go unconscious, that's when troubles start. Can you force yourself to be conscious? Can you put some rules in place? When I watch TV, there's no food available. I started to do things like crocheting, or when I got tendonitis in my arm, I had to change that because I did too much of that, and find something else to do. And so, because if I don't and I just want TV, yes, I'm very blessed that I never in my life developed a taste for popcorn. I don't like popcorn. It's one of those, it's one of the three foods that's on the top of my list of I don't eat that. I will never eat that. One is popcorn, unless it's sweet. I would eat sweet popcorn, but salty popcorn, that's a big no. So I'm very grateful because I've watched people in movies unconsciously eating a whole bucket of popcorn. That cannot be healthy.
Yeah,
And that's not even dinner. So, can you retrain your brain to have very strict boundaries in place so that you do not go unconscious? So that TV doesn't equal I have to eat something. Never, ever, ever eat in front of the TV. Never, never, ever eat in front of the TV because you will eat unconsciously. Your mind will block out the ability to say, I've had enough. And then
yeah,
you overeat. And once you overeat, you have an insulin response and it wants more.
yeah. And I think that emotional eating, um, there's the won't stop versus the can't stop. So there was a researcher in at New York University, and he was the head of the psych department, and he wanted to see the how the brain reacted to a shock, right? So you can't do this on people. And he could see that when he did it on animals, there was a certain response. But you can't talk to an animal to find out what they're thinking. So he had his research assistant shock his foot to see what he was thinking after the shock. And so they shocked his foot because he really believed that shocking his foot, if he was aware of about the shock coming, that he could prevent the startle reflex. So if you get a needle in the bottom of the foot, your sympathetic nervous system is going to react, right? It's the fight or flee. And so he really believed that he could stop his foot from moving. And so he had his research assistant shock the bottom of his foot. And of course, he could not control it. That sympathetic nervous response kicked in. But what was super interesting was as soon as she shocked his foot, he goes, "Oh my goodness, do it again." And then she shocked it. Do it again. He said, I can't believe this is happening. And she said, what's going on? Do it. And he's like, do it again. And he did it numerous times. And he said that after she shocked his foot and he had that startled reaction, his brain told him that he wanted to move his foot back, and that's why he did. And so you see the difference. Rather
Right.
than his brain telling him, I have no control, his brain told him, you do have control and you moved it back on your own. And so that can be applied to emotional eating.
Right.
So what happens is our brain hijacks us. So we keep the eating on, but the problem is we start to beat ourselves up over it
Mhm.
because our brain tells us that we could do better. We can stop that eating. We can control it. What is wrong with us? And we start beating ourselves up because we believe that we can actually control it. But we cannot control it because our leptin receptors, our sugar receptors are so hijacked that there is no way we can control
Right.
that. We can't control it. It's out of our control. So because we're addicted, because we might be binge eaters, because of that, once we start, we cannot control it. It's not like I could say, I'll take one bite and put it away. I can't. I know that about myself. And it's the same as an alcoholic. One drink is too much, 20 is not enough. So it's the first bite that counts.
Exactly.
You cannot take
Exactly.
the first bite because as soon as you
Mhm.
do, you're done. You're done.
Yeah.
So, I
So
mean,
valuable. Yeah.
it's horrible. It's a horrible idea that, oh my God, I'll never be able to eat that, whatever it is. But if you're an addict, I'm sorry, you're an addict. But the thing is, let's get to the root because when you understand why you became an addict in the first place, then you have this realization that, okay, I can forgive myself. I can be I can be gentle with myself because this is what happened in my life as a child. This is what I believed as a child, and this is what caused me to become an addict, an emotional eater, a person who can't stop at one bite. I mean, it's it's just the way it is. But there's freedom in it and there's power in that knowledge. You said it already. Understanding is power. There's power in the knowledge that no, I cannot eat that because this is what happens. Yeah.
So I want to tell you, in line of all of that, that you so beautifully put, I've seen in the last 3 years, a lot of the reasons people start to overeat and binge eat and why food become a coping mechanism for them. Number one, in childhood, they were abused. If they had a very controlling parent, they would find their own control in secretly eating. If they had a parent who always told them that you cannot speak up, when they spoke up, they were in trouble. It's so interesting. Swallowing and speaking up. In a very big way, their heart's desire is to express themselves, but they could not. So they found a way to numb that freedom to express themselves by eating. And the more they swallow food, swallowing just air and saliva is not the same thing. You need that heavy thickness inside your throat to suppress the need to kind of scream out.
Mhm.
Very interesting how that works.
Mhm.
Also, having extra weight on them is protection
Mhm.
when they were very, very much abused. And it's some of them describe it as a warm blanket over themselves. I asked my clients, you and I talked about this before, thanks to Dr. Ran Anbar, who we have introduced. I start my sessions now with, where is your absolute favorite place? Can you imagine yourself going there? And so many of women who are overweight or who have been in abusive situations, their safest place is under the cover in their beds. And then a lot of times they don't want to let go of this extra weight because it is their protection, or they can hide. It's so interesting. No two people are the same. I've seen people who have been sexually abused many, many times over. I've seen people who were in narcissistic childhood situations many, many times over. And I've seen children who had a very happy childhood, but who were bullied in school for no reason. And they started to believe the bully. I've seen people who are in a situation in the families where they self-sacrifice themselves. And one client so eloquently said that every time this family member chews at me emotionally, I go and I find something else to chew on.
Mhm.
So it's understanding those things. So, friend, very importantly, though, I want to talk about how we make a change. How do you change?
Yeah. Well, number one, knowledge is power. So if you understand yourself, you understand the small, you understand your vices. If you can understand and like recognize why you're like that, that's number one. Number two is once you're aware, then you have to be like take action, right? So awareness and action and and commitment to the process, right? So if it's like, yeah, I used to be a smoker. So often addictions work in pairs. So I was a smoker and I was a binge eater, right? And so addictions and in pairs, often you'll see a person who's an alcoholic and he's a cigarette smoker, or maybe not a cigarette smoker anymore, maybe you turn to vaping. So look at yourself and don't beat yourself up over it. Oh my God, the amount of times I cried. I'm eating this stuff and I'm crying. And sometimes it becomes bulimia if you're not careful, right? Especially in a teenage girl. Because if you're putting that stuff in your mouth because you're not allowed to speak, because your parents are so controlling, because there might be sexual abuse in the family, because of all of that, but you're a teenage girl and you want to look a certain way, and then there's the binge eating that happens. I mean, if we can get to the bottom and find out and understand, oh my goodness, that person inside of me that was 13 years old or 5 years old or whatever experienced this. And under hypnosis, we get to those places, right? We find out what it was that happened to you, this beautiful, beautiful girl. Something happened. We can get to the bottom and then we can zoom out and look at the big picture and see, okay. And our client looks at the big picture too. And they can become so empathetic, so sympathetic with that little beautiful person that was being hurt. And we didn't have at the time someone to protect us. We didn't have that, or just those people weren't available. They weren't keyed in enough. And so we have to love that little human inside of us that just was doing the best she could. She knew she couldn't speak. It wasn't, you weren't allowed to scream out. You weren't allowed to tell anybody the secrets that might have been going on in the house, but I'll take care of you and I'll always love you. You're here with me and I will protect you, and no one will ever treat you that way again. So just saying those words to yourself has incredible healing power. And then some of the techniques we also use in RTT, talking to the perpetrator if that's appropriate, or rescuing the child, like going into that environment, going into that scene, back into that scene with our client who's whatever age old, and rescuing the child out of that scene and taking that child to a safe place. That's incredibly healing, even though it's all with the mind, it's all with the subconscious. And so there's other techniques that we use in RTT to, to get to the bottom of what caused this, to understand it, to to help that person get control back in whatever way is possible within that scene, and then to change their mindset by reframing it and giving them a recording to listen to. Where listening to a recording repeatedly, day after day after day after day, gives them so much power, so much strength over the situation. So when I listen to my recording for emotional eating, it says in there all the things that I want, that I am completely, I'm not interested at all in taking the first bite of the cookie. I'm not interested at all in whatever vices that it is that I know will be my gateway into eating unconsciously until the whole bag is gone. There's cues in the recording that remind my subconscious brain that when I see it, I automatically will say, I don't like that stuff.
Oh my goodness, Fran, you just froze. So I'm gonna keep talking and until you come back. So for me, exactly what you described now, the understanding of why this showed up
And
in
what we
our
can do
lives.
about it.
Okay, you froze for quite a bit, so I jumped in
Oh,
there.
thank you.
No idea where you were. So anyway, I started talking and I was saying, yes, the different steps that we take. First, the understanding, and then the in our sessions, we get to this point where we help our clients to be the detectives.
Yeah,
This behavior, what is the real role of this behavior, the function, the purpose, the intention in my life? And sometimes that aha moment is just so profound when they can see what is this behavior actually doing. And then from there to what I call the upgrade, to go find that compassion for themselves, to go find the strength within themselves. I always get very excited when a client comes to me and they say, well, I used to be an alcoholic, but I stopped drinking, or I used to be smoking and I stopped smoking. How did you stop that? Oh, I just decided I'm not going to do that anymore. Okay, great. We're going to find that strength within you. It's already there. And we all have to eat. We all don't have to drink. Like nobody needs to drink alcohol. It's luxury. But if you cannot manage it, it's better not to do that. Smoking, nobody should smoke. It's dangerous. It's a carcinogenic. But we all have to eat. And so there's a management component in there too. And yes, we can avoid certain foods. But I love it when a client comes to me and they say, I'm now indifferent to binge eating. I'm indifferent to overeating. I'm indifferent to mindlessly sitting in front of the TV eating. I'm indifferent to sugar. That is when I know we've got this. I know that they've made a change forever. And I've tested this in myself. I can have a store full of chocolates in my house. If it's white chocolate, I'm in trouble. Or if it's jelly candy, I'm in trouble. And I had to really work hard on myself to say no. Because once I open that pack of jelly candy and I start to eat it, I cannot stop. And I've tried many, many, many times. So this is something I still want to overcome. In full disclosure, I want to have that pack of wine gums in my pantry that's open. And I don't want it to call my name all the time. And I want to say, okay, I feel like one today and have one, and that's enough. But that takes practice. And then, yes, we do this recording. So finding that power within yourself, finding that drive within yourself so that you can walk through the door into a better life. I call it the future self. Who is your future self? If this problem is not in your life anymore, how do you act? How do you think? How do you feel about yourself? It's amazing the things that comes out. I feel proud. I have such great self-esteem. I feel wonderful. I feel in control. I feel I have power. So if we make that bigger, if we make that more, if we put that in the recording and let them remember that that can be their new reality every single moment of the day. They don't have to give their power away to empty food. That's not even food, it's products. They don't
Mhm.
have to mindlessly eat. They can find that power within themselves. I absolutely love it. I love it. I love it when I get emails months later. Marina, you will not believe it. It's been 6 months and I haven't binged yet, or I haven't had sugar yet. I love it. It's the favorite kind of thing in this world when clients get to that.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think knowledge is power. So if we can understand ourselves, we can start to figure out what we need to do next. The emotions, and one thing we didn't touch on is after our clients or ourselves or whoever it is loses weight, there's emotions that surface, right? It's like the body starts to purge, and you might have been stuffing down different types of anxiety or anger or whatever emotions were being stuffed down. And once we start to lose the weight, it's like we can start getting rid of these emotions we've been stuffing for countless years. So I want the people who are listening all to also to understand that is normal and that is natural. And so someone might say, you need to have this, whatever it is, because look at you, you're so cranky. You're such a bitch now. Like you weren't like that before, but it's normal because finally we have our voice back, right? We have our voice, and all those emotions that got stuffed back down that we're holding in our stomach for so long get a chance to come out and be expressed. And it won't be forever. It won't be. But thank the good law, thank God you're able to express it now because it's not going to turn into diabetes or heart disease or cancers or autoimmunes or whatever, or sore joints. You'll be able to get those emotions out and start to live a happy, free life. Whereas as long as you keep stuffing stuff down, it's just not going to happen.
I think, Fran, what you brought up is so important, and I think that's one of the reasons when I ever work with a weight loss client, it's not just one session, because there's normally a reason then for them to lash out when they lose the weight. And there's also a lot of times when people lose weight, they get body dysmorphia. They don't believe that they are skinny. It's important to look at that as well. You know, why can they not see reality? And that's something that I battled with and I had to face head on because I saw myself all my life as morbidly obese and I'm not.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's sometimes in the past when people say, "But Marina, you're not fat," I would not believe them. I would see myself as fat. And it took me a long time to understand why did I think like that. So we deal with a lot of emotions when you deal with emotional eating, when you deal with that addiction. And then you brought up when you turn into a person you don't really like and you lash out and you become angry and you express yourself in a very angry way. It's very important to look at that. It's very important to find out why and then find that coping skills. Because if eating was a coping skill for you, in my case, boredom, I still today have to watch out. If I'm bored, I would go to the kitchen and I would think of things to eat and I would convince myself that I'm hungry. And it took a lot of times for me to say, no, 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 go take a walk or go work in the garden or go do this or go do something on your computer or distract yourself because you're not hungry, you're bored. And be honest with yourself. Be super honest with yourself about the things that will trigger you. Um, a lot of times, because we do these 2 hour sessions with our clients, and sometimes It can be very deep and it can be very, we have to focus the entire time. We have to be so on that we find these tiny little nuances. We read it and we can see, oh my gosh, I said this word and my client, even though their eyes are closed, they made this jerk. What was that? What was that jerk reaction when I said this word? So we have to be on and to concentrate that much for 2 hours. Sometimes I find myself emotionally drained. And in the beginning, the first thing I would do is I would go down to the kitchen and say, okay, I need something to eat. No, I don't. No, I don't. Find another coping skill. Also, I love to upgrade my clients to a place where they can truly, truly fall in love with themselves. When a person fall in love with themselves, they want to be the best version of who they are. And then they will catch themselves before they express themselves in a way where they don't love, where they have to go back. And sometimes it takes a journey to get to that point where they are, I don't like it when I lash out at people. I don't like it when people see me as a negative person. I don't like it when I have that behavior. And it's so important. And luckily, I have my husband to keep me in check sometimes and say, okay, Marina, when this happens in your life, I can see your response in that. And I love it because then I can say, I'm so sorry, I'm going to go fix it. And then I'm aware of it. So if you have people in your life that can make you aware of it, it's not always a negative thing. It's a blessing because then you have the power to make a change. So yeah, this is so layered. There's not a blueprint that we can say, okay, do this and do this and do that. It's really layered. No two people are the same. So it's so worth investigating what is behind the behavior and how can you upgrade yourself to that person you absolutely fall in love with so that you can take care of yourself for the rest of your life. One promise I made myself in 2017 is that I will become that 80 something year old granny who will outrun everybody, who will be healthy in mind, in spirit, and in body. And today is the day that I work on that. Everything I consume today adds to what will be the result in 30 years from now.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, beautiful. Well, it was a wonderful discussion we had today, and we talked on so many things. And like you said, there's so many layers to emotional eating that it's not just willpower. Willpower comes at the end. Willpower comes at the end when you figure out why. The why comes first, the willpower comes after. Let's not pretend that willpower will do it all. It won't. It won't. Good habits, looking at food labels, don't eat in front of the TV if that's one of the problems. What are the foods that really trigger you? What are the emotions that really trigger you? And get help. Get help. You don't need to be that person who beats themselves up because they emotionally or binge ate or ate off plan or whatever it was. You don't need to be that person who is also getting beat up as well as physically and mentally. So there's help for you. There's help in so many ways. Mhm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Fran. It
Thank
was
you, hon.
lovely.
It
And
always
thank you
is.
for everybody watching and listening. And we hope that this had some value to you today and gave you hope in the Hopenning. We will
Mhm.
see you next time. And remember to subscribe.
Yes. Love you. Bye bye.